We're about 1 minute before the top of the hour, maybe just a little less than that, and we're welcoming folks back to the 2020 Reinvention Collaborative Undergraduate Vice President and Vice Provost meeting, the UVP meeting, our first ever. That's virtual, and we've been delighted to have some 70 participants, the most we've ever had at a UVP meeting. So we'll start soon. We'll give folks a chance to join us. People are having to switch platforms if they participated in the immediately prior Gatherly session, which was a whole lot of fun. And we thank Colin Potts again from Georgia Tech for introducing us to this tool, which was first developed by students at Georgia Tech. And it was a lot of fun to interact with people on that platform. And again, just while people are rejoining us, I would like to thank Hugh Page from the University of Notre Dame for his presentation this morning, and also Verna Fitzsimmons of hers for her presentation, and to all the participants who joined us and added so much with their comments and input in conversation, both small group and large. And acknowledge that Rob Pangorn, one of our long-standing members who's 15 years in his role at Penn State University, is stepping down in a few weeks, retiring from the university. What service to that institution and to the Reinvention Collaborative, extraordinary. Not many people do this kind of important work for so long and have such a great impact. We thank Rob. And remember, just a quick heads up for everyone that after this session, the one immediately following, we'll have a 1-hour discussion about spring semester planning led by Rachel Holloway from Virginia Tech. Rachel's our new president-elect of the Reinvention Collaborative. And then tomorrow there are 3 workshops, one on HERS mid-career workshop, another on strategic enrollment management, and a third on curricular analytics. And just a quick reminder to everyone again that Monday we feature Michael Denon and Richard Aram from the University of California, Irvine, who will be talking about institutional racism. There's over 350 already registered for that. Plenty of room. It's unlimited. There's no capacity, so everyone's welcome to join. Bring team members and other colleagues. Without further ado, I'd like to turn this session over to our moderator, Archie Holmes, who many of you know. Yeah, just as you step away, Archie. Exactly. Everyone knows Archie from his role on our board of the Reinvention Collaborative and at Virginia Tech, and I think everyone knows he's recently transitioned to the University of Texas system as their provost and vice chancellor. So thanks, Archie, for moderating this session. We really appreciate it. I'll turn off my screen now and turn it over to you.
All right. Well, again, good to have all of you here. I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have with our colleagues here. So let me introduce them quickly. So we have Ann Cudd, who currently serves as the provost and senior vice chancellor at the University of Pittsburgh, a role that she's held since 2018. Prior to that, she was the vice provost and dean of undergraduate studies of the University of Kansas. Bernard Mair, who serves as the senior vice president for academic affairs and the chief academic officer at the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. He's been in that role since 2019. And prior, he was an associate provost for undergraduate affairs at the University of Florida back in 2009, from 2009 to 2015. And last but certainly not least, we have Carol Parker, who is the provost at New Mexico State University since 2019. So the newest block next to me. Previously was the provost at one of the institutions in the system and where I currently am at the University of Texas in El Paso. And she also served as a senior vice provost for academic affairs at the University of New Mexico in 2013 to 2017. So what my hope is that we're just going to have a conversation about kind of the current state of things and how higher ed is going to respond. So you will have options of being able to ask questions. So please do, if you have questions, use the question and answer sequence, and I will work to bring those into the conversation as makes sense. And so hopefully this will be an enlightening conversation. So I'm going to start off with kind of a prompting question for all of them to get us started. So 2020 has been economically, personally, and socially challenging for all of us. It is also made more clear, in my opinion, that these challenges are not borne equally by all members of our communities, country, and the world. One of the reasons I'm in this role is I firmly believe that the academic missions of higher ed in general and research universities in particular have been positioned to address these issues that we now see, and to help people find their purpose, become productive citizens, and have the ability to thrive both personally and professionally. So what I'd love for you to do is to talk about, from in your roles, how do you see higher ed adapting and charting a path forward, noting the fact that I would argue that the path that we had been on is probably not the path that we need to do to be successful going forward. So Anne, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you first to give your initial remarks. You're muted, Anne, sorry. Anne.
Muted. So thank you very much, Archie. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate here today. This is an incredibly important group of people. I was very much inspired by my experiences as a vice provost for undergraduate studies, and that really shapes my work today. You know, I think there's no question that between the COVID-19 pandemic, the consequent economic collapse, and the racial reckoning that our nation is undergoing, higher education is both suffering but also learning lessons that are, I think, going to allow us to plan for a better world beyond these difficult days. But it's really clear, I think, that we can't keep doing what we've been doing the way we've been doing it before, both for reasons of equity and justice, but also for simply because our industry is changing, if you will. What our students are expecting is changing. We need to change the way that we teach. We need to be more equitable in the way we practice admissions and bring in our students, and then make sure that they stay on track to graduate. And we need to use the lessons of the pandemic and the quick pivot to remote teaching to provide greater access. So I think access and affordability has become even more important. Not only are we seeing many students challenged to afford higher education, but it is and has been an urgent issue for students from lower income families and students of color. And I think it's really important that we pay attention to student indebtedness and how that affects continued enrollment and graduation. These systemic inequalities really work their way into the academic environment and work against social equity. And I think that the pandemic has just underscored that in so many different areas. But you know, one of the things I'm interested in thinking more clearly about is the tension between embracing competition and elite education for the most talented versus, or at the same time, creating more equality through emphasizing access to more and more people to education, and especially at a research university like our universities. Social mobility has always been the promise of higher education, but we haven't really been delivering on it, and we need to work harder to do so. If we're really to transform our world, to promote social justice and social mobility, higher education really has to lead in this area, because we are the ones who most effectively create and also at the same time critique inequality in society. We can lead change, I think, by effectively critiquing inequality and teaching our students, who will be the leaders of the future, to practice and champion diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout their lives. I think we can change our institutions to be more accessible to more people, and we can push our ideas out about the need for and mechanisms of social change into the wider world. Our universities play a very special role in educating the leaders of tomorrow, and I think we must not shirk from that role and responsibility. The role of a research university is quite simply to take on grand challenges and solve big problems. I'm proud to say that Pitt is really playing a huge role in the research to find therapies to treat COVID. as well as in vaccine research. But while that's critically important, that's not all. We're also continuing to advance opportunities for experiential learning, which is incredibly motivating to students and faculty. So I think that a research university can really motivate our students, our undergraduate and graduate students on many levels by working to solve these real problems. And among those are the problems concerning inequality and racial disparities in health, wealth, safety in our home communities. And these are grand challenges that motivate students to solve for the systemic vulnerabilities in marginalized communities. And I think that work belongs to all of us. And we have many experts at our research universities on our campuses. So, you know, another aspect of this is really working, doubling down on personalizing education so that we can make sure that every student succeeds and graduates. And I think, you know, those are the pandemic pivot, if you will, has provided a silver lining. By urgent necessity, due to that pandemic, the educational ecosystem is expanding and diversifying to a degree, and we can push that access and affordability out there through our capacity for remote education and for conducting education on remote in remote places. So just to conclude, I think while the pandemic may have closed the door in some ways, most definitely it's opened windows, and we must take the opportunity to make those doors. So thank you.
Archie, you're muted.
Of course, we're all muted, of course. So Carol, can I turn it over to you to give your perspective from New Mexico State?
Sure. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. You know, I thought a lot about what I might say today, given the audience, given your roles as Vice Provost for the most part, in the context of research universities, which are more essential and vital than ever, given everything the country's going through, the world's going through right now. I continue to believe that the soundest path forward for us is to preserve our research universities and preserve access to education, because education is just more vital than ever. And you know, there's a counter narrative right now about college no longer being a good investment, if you will. And I think it's really important that we become more activist in that regard. And we need to have a counter narrative out there that fights that strongly. So, you know, the need for social transformation is greater than ever. Social mobility, as Ann mentioned, those are things that research universities are certainly capable of contributing to and achieving, in addition to the wonderful contributions from our research mission, including economic development. But to sort of bring it down to where you probably are likely to live as a vice provost, at least based on my experience in that role, your mission, your challenge is going to be supporting our faculty through this transition, partnering with our student success professionals who help us support the students. But I've been thinking a lot about the faculty role in student success and the support that we as universities will need to provide our faculty to navigate these transitions. I foresee in our future 4 areas really that are going to greatly impact our faculty. We've been talking about these impacts on our own campus already, of course. One is definitely the need to provide much greater and stronger professional development opportunities for our faculty to navigate what we are asking of them to do right now, to make so many pedagogical adjustments and be nimble and pivot. You know, I'm so tired of hearing about pivots and being nimble, but truly we are asking an extraordinary amount of our faculty. And so I foresee and am working on already some new programs to do everything that we can to support the faculty and throughout their career. We're also thinking a lot about really our pedagogical standards for instructional delivery. The pandemic experience and the sudden transition to online really clarified that we're really dealing with 4 different sectors of students with different needs. Of course, we have the classical first-time, full-time freshmen. They are challenged right now because the opportunities for engagement are definitely not what they had expected. We are working hard to try to maintain engagement opportunities for those students. That's very challenging. You know, in many cases, the transition from high school to college represents their transition into adulthood. You know, getting away from mom and dad for the first time, living on your own, making new friends. And so we're really concerned about retaining that cohort of our students. I'm very concerned that some might stop out. So that's something that we're working on. Similarly, you know, the upper division students, they're in a different mindset. You know, they're starting to think about looking ahead to their career. They're maybe a little more of a transactional mode. So opportunities to support them as they worry about whether I'm going to get a job in this economy right now. So that's implying a lot of effort into internships and experiential learning, applied learning of all sorts. And of course, the career services, trying to integrate that into advising much earlier than we may have in the past. The research component, the graduate education, preserve and protect, you know, despite the virus, research will go on. That's sort of, I think, very achievable and doable, but, you know, many challenges there. And then we really are experiencing the emergence of a new sector of students, the adult learner, who we previously described as the non-traditional student, but they have extremely different needs than the other sectors that I mentioned. So we've been focusing a lot on trying to grow that market, especially because I foresee that I would like to see universities be able to provide more opportunities throughout one's career, and especially if we are worried about people stopping out and trying to come back. You know, we're going to need more flexible on and off ramps for people who have to deal with disruption in their personal life because of pandemics, the economy, what have you. So, you know, we're challenged there. But then the really challenging part is the, mental health concerns for everyone in higher ed. I mean, everyone is under great stress right now. And I foresee the need to invest a lot of effort in that area. And I'm also really concerned about discrepancies in, gender-based roles, for example. You know, we heard very early on, even beginning in April, we were getting reports that men faculty were getting really productive. They were able to write many research proposals, whereas the women faculty proposal rate of writing was decreasing because they were doing more at home with homeschooling their children. I'm really concerned that as a university, we have to navigate expectations around our promotion and tenure systems that find some way to level the playing field, I guess is the best expression I can use. And that means we have to go through some kind of a process of adjusting expectations around what we will expect of our probationary faculty. So, that's a lot of things to tackle, but as Vice Provost, I would imagine many of you would be right in the thick of that in terms of these initiatives. And I look forward to finding guidance and leadership from our professional societies and associations, such as Reinvention Collaborative. And I predict that we'll be continuing to work on these types of challenges for a while, for many years to come.
Thanks, Carol. Bernard, from your perspective at APLU, what would you like to add?
Thank you, Archie, and thanks to Steve for inviting me to this panel. I was here last year, albeit in person, at Colorado State. This is a different environment, but nonetheless, we will make the best of it. I certainly agree with our previous speakers, Anne and Carol, about the advantages and the challenges we face, and there are many more challenges that we face. And Archie, at the systems level, you can see that have a totally different perspective. However, I would like to, in the interest of not repeating any of those issues, I would like to sort of follow up on some of the points that have already been raised. And branch out maybe in another direction. So I would like to say that, we've all talked about the fast transition and pivoting to online, or in some cases, what the experts in the field call remote learning, not online. However, and that was very successful. And initially, when we spoke to many of our campuses at APLU, we were having a lot of concern from the provosts about faculty not being prepared for that environment. A lot of pushback from faculty about getting the training needed to be prepared. A lot of faculty expressing concern about, well, I now have to spend my summer going through professional development and that sort of thing. But after that process has taken place, it seems to be completely the opposite, that now faculty are very happy with this new environment. They want to continue in this environment. There's a lot of flexibility associated with it, a lot of creativity that they can put into it. And I think this is one of the benefits of a crisis, that going through the difficulties, we land on a better place on the other side. And if we look at it from that perspective, I think the institution and the system, higher educational system, is going through this stress test that on the other side will reap many benefits and rewards, not just to the universities and to the system as a whole, but for the country as a whole. Certainly access will be much more improved with our online systems. We can create different standards, we can create different programs, we can be creative, we can embed various certifications into online programs much more readily than in the standard face-to-face brick and mortar environment that we were living in before. So, never waste a crisis, as they say, and it's been beneficial. And going through the crucible to land on the other side is always a difficult process. So I'm hope that I will spread some cheer that going through this difficult times will put us in a better place on the other side. The thing that also benefited higher ed as a whole is that during the COVID pandemic, research universities really stepped up to the plate. We performed research on COVID protocols and therapeutics and vaccines, but we also used our abilities to provide a service to the community. In many cases, the community was being tested by a medical center. In fact, in many states, the research flagship universities were providing testing for large areas, large swaths of those states. And especially for the land-grant institutions, we saw a sort of coming together of our extension, education, and research missions coming together all in one because of the access that we have throughout the state. And extension offices becoming hubs of educational access for students, being used to mitigate the digital divide between those who have access to the web and those who do not have adequate access to the web. So I think that, you know, as has been mentioned, there has been a public deterioration of trust and significance of public universities, but I'm hoping that the service that we have provided to our communities have mitigated some of those concerns about our ability, not just being ivory towers of research that's not relevant, but also in being able to translate those research activities into actual practical community service. The other thing that, and again, this didn't start out like this, where there was tension between administration and faculty in this pivot, in this transition. But in order to be successful, it seems that actually the relationship between university administration and faculty has improved and increased. In many cases, the administration had to make decisions that affected the entire university, affected faculty assignments, affected academic regulations so quickly that they could not go through the usual regulatory process. And so the faculty senates had to come together to work together with the administration to say, yeah, we trust you that you're going to do the best for the university. And we trust you to make those decisions without the usual approval process of a year and a day, right? Which is fast in academia. So again, this emergency really brought out the best in us as human beings, as faculty members who at our heart, are interested in the success of our students, in the success of our universities, in the health of our communities. It really brought out the best of us and enabled us to trust each other. And I would like to mention the other component of trust is that during this time, universities gave faculty members and students a lot of flexibility in grading systems. And so the question is, how did the student trust the faculty member to give them a grade of no pass or pass? What were the standards for those different grades? And during this time, there were some anecdotes that students actually said that they've trusted their faculty members to make decisions in their best interest of the students. And again, that encouraged the strengthening of the trust relationship between faculty and students. So all around, I think, despite the difficulties we faced, it was definitely a heartwarming time to see the best of the human spirit rising above the difficulties that we experienced. I don't want to go on further, but I will stop there and encourage your questions.
Yeah, but Bernard, it's interesting what you bring up is a university that fundamentally is more empathetic than it used to be, right? In terms of the way that the administration, was that your sense, Ann and Carol, in terms of having to navigate through this crisis in the real-time scenario? Yeah, start with Carol.
Yes, absolutely. It was extraordinary to see the faculty and the administration work together throughout the spring and summer. In our case at NMSU, we did reopen our campus physically in August, and that's taken an enormous amount of trust as well as collaboration and adaptation. So it really was quite an exceptional moment, like nothing I've ever experienced in the 20 years I've been an administrator in higher ed. So what lessons we can take from that and hang on to and retain, we shall see, but it did demonstrate our capacity to collaborate.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, I mean, we saw that a lot too, but the trust went the other way as well, which was very heartwarming to see how it was taken up. So we, from the administrative side, gave faculty a tremendous amount of flexibility in how they would teach and how they would choose to teach. And we gave students a lot of flexibility. We gave them rules and guidelines for mitigating the virus, for their behavior. And to a great extent, they have adhered. I mean, the mask adherence has been almost universal anywhere on campus. The students have, and we've reaped really good results as a result. So I think that it really shows that we can come together as a community and trust each other rather than having to have hard guidelines and, you know, adversarial positions between faculty and students, or faculty and administrators. And you know, we've had the occasional skirmishes for sure. In some cases, those are good points where we notice there's a disagreement, and then we back off and say, okay, then we'll go forward in this way. But I agree completely with Bernard that that's been a very good silver lining to the pandemic.
So Carol, you kind of suggested this in your statement. How do we ensure that it lasts, right? How do we ensure that when we don't get on the other side of this, that everyone just doesn't go back to business as usual, and we're fighting these battles again? Bernard, I would love your thoughts about this as well, but I think that's really, like you said, we've learned some really cool things here, and we want to make sure that they persist beyond this current crisis.
Right. I mean, it has been interesting. I mean, sometimes I feel like we're going through the 5 stages of grief, right? You know, we're mourning the loss of our old life. I mean, our work lives are so different, and they, in many ways, were extremely pleasant. So we're going through a process now, and there's bargaining. Hopefully we're getting to acceptance. But I saw a point, well, it was probably around October. It became more clear that this was not going to be maybe as short-lived as we had thought, because I think a lot of people still held out hope that we'll just get through this one strange year and then we'll be back to, quote, normal. And as the realization sunk in that might not ever come back, you know, that way of life, that professional life is going to be forever changed, started to sink in, then we saw people wrestling with that. You know, it really did become almost like a sense of mourning for the loss of that. And I think one thing that will come out of this permanently will be an understanding that rigor can still exist, but it will be possible to, we're going to be doing more personalized learning, I think. The personalization of the higher ed experience, I think, is inevitable, and it's going to be accelerated. We've all heard about personalized learning assessment, and this is the wave of the future, and that technology would facilitate that. But the cultural aspect of the change the pandemic has caused, I think, is going to further amplify that. We've been forced to acknowledge that everyone in higher ed, students, staff, faculty alike, we are all wrestling with our work-life balance. And I'd like to think that that will become more acceptable, and that we will recognize that everyone needs to find work-life balance, and that it's okay to adapt. So we're going through this process, but I would like to think that we'll come out on the other side, maybe a kinder, more gentler university, open to more ideas, and, as I said, more ability to meet people where they are, rather than refusing to work with somebody until they can clear the bar and come up to some some standard that you personally are expecting of them. So we'll see.
Bernard or Ann, anything to add?
Yeah, well, I would like to talk about making sure that the lessons of the Black Lives Matter movement and the movement for racial equity really sticks. And that is going to be, that's going to be a long and arduous struggle, has been already, but, and so one of the, I think, really deepest points is really to change our curriculum and to change the way that we teach so that we are more inclusive of the Black experience as our Black students have demanded, and rightfully so that our pedagogy is inclusive and our classrooms are inclusive so that all of our students feel like they belong. And then also making sure that our curriculum, we heard stories from students that they'd gone through 4 years in a major in the humanities and had never read the work of a Black author. Now that's unacceptable in my view, right? That's just a simple thing, and many other, areas of the curriculum would be diversified in different ways. But we have to make that culture change. And it does have, I think, connects with what Carol said about rigor, as if what we used to think of as the mainstream of the discipline is the only rigorous place. And this goes back to, I think that by taking on the grand challenges of equity and racial disparities and things like that, we can center some of the most important grand challenges in the center of our research work. And so that's what we're trying to do at Pitt as just a couple of aspects of making sure that this sticks as we go forward.
I agree with you. Sorry, Bernard, did you want to add something?
Oh, I just wanted to give a story
Yeah, sure.
that came up in our annual meeting that we held earlier this week. One of our sessions that we organized was Decolonizing the Curriculum, which speaks exactly to Ann's point. And one of the panelists mentioned that, told a story about a P&T committee meeting, a faculty meeting about promotion and tenure of a faculty member. And this faculty member was criticized, their research was criticized because they only focused on Black studies and did not incorporate any European studies. And the point was made to that by another faculty, well, this would not have come up if the roles were reversed, would it?
Correct.
Yes.
But and I want to build on this because I think it's a really important conversation, right? Because I also, as I think about the history of research universities, right, they were built and our structures were built at a time where not everybody was welcome, right? So I don't know that it's only just the curriculum. There's a lot of fundamental changes, whether it's P&T, there are lots of students who might want to come to our institutions who don't feel welcome. And it's back to that access issue, Ann, that you kind of talked about earlier. So how do we try to do that? How do we try to really fundamentally change the perception of research universities just beyond the curriculum to allow us to meet that mission that you all, which I agree with, is where we ultimately need to go?
Well, I just say one thing to start the discussion off, and I'm sure it is happening maybe at Pitt and New Mexico, that many of our institutions, we had a discussion about this, and of course, many institutions have now this semester, in the fall semester, suspended standardized testing as hoops for students to go through. The movement has already started a long time ago in the graduate school environment, but it's now, again, the pandemic is forcing us to look at other markers. And we all know that the research suggests that those are not indicators of student success, even in our own programs. But why do we do that? One of the reasons I suspect is because of the ranking process, the national ranking process of selectivity. And when will, how much of an impact does that have on our university policies?
Yeah. Yeah, Carol.
I think that there are so many parts of universities that run on autopilot, that there's a lot of opportunity for us if we pause and think intentionally about literally about our business practices, right? The unintentional barriers that we put up for not just our students who may be underprepared or socioeconomically disadvantaged in some way, the same thing for our faculty members who themselves may have been first-generation students or maybe are not as savvy about the ways of academia. Not knowing that it's okay to negotiate your initial offer and see course releases, startups. We need to examine our processes. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a department chair at one point. We were talking about recruitment, hiring processes, and the ever delicate topic of faculty compensation rates. And I asked the chair, what do you see as your main purpose to achieve in setting a starting salary when you're making an offer? And about half of the people said that they thought they were doing a great service to the university by trying to get the salary down as low as they possibly could. And I pointed out that, well, that may not be equitable. It may not even be legal. But more importantly, we are investing in faculty. They are investing in us. We hope that they will become tenured and stay with the university. You're actually putting them on a really poor trajectory for success, because we give, in our processes, we offer so few opportunities to go back and fix a salary that was set too low. And if you set a salary too low for a woman or a member of an underrepresented group, you're actually creating risk for the university. Their lifetime earnings will possibly be lower, or they may be poached and you'll lose them. I mean, there are just so many reasons not to approach that in that way. Instead, think about this is an opportunity to position that faculty member for success and find out what they need as an individual to succeed and tailor a package for them. And it's that kind of intentionality and mindset that I think we need to bring to virtually every aspect of our operation, because that's where we will find the structural bias. Let's talk about, why are we doing things this way? Can we do it differently and get a better outcome? So that requires the support of leadership and the commitment to say that that's what we want to achieve here. We want to get into our structures, get into our processes, and be mindful about what it is we hope to achieve.
So before I open it up for questions, one of the things that I always think is a challenge is to try to say what the metrics of success look like when you're in the middle of a transition like this, right? Because we just don't know what's coming. But I'm curious as to what are the indicators that you are using or you're thinking about that would at least give you an indication that we are going to be prepared for what comes on the other side. Hopefully that made sense, right? What are you looking for? What are those little nuggets that you as provost or you, Bernard, looking at in your role at APLU that would help us to that, yeah, we really are going to take advantage of this opportunity and that we're not going to squander it?
Well, I want to come back to the point about admissions and not using the SAT or ACT. So I want to see what is the result of our enrollment in the fall, for next fall, in terms of diversity and in terms of the various ways that we're looking at students. So I've convened every one of our freshman admitting schools to talk about what do you really want in the student body as a whole? What is it you're looking for? What makes for a really dynamic group of students who are going to feed off each other and create and be innovative and become the leaders of tomorrow. So I'm looking for my deans and my admissions committees to come up with some great ways of assessing the contribution, the potential contribution of these students going forward. I think that's going to be a new mindset in thinking about in a collective way rather than individually. In a collective way, what makes for a great student body.
Great. Carol, Bernard, any thoughts about that?
Well, in terms of metrics for success in the short term, I mean, literally, I think we're all going to be looking at retention and enrollment, right? I mean, there is such an, well, we're very concerned about that. And that's to my point earlier about me worrying about a lost generation in a way. If people's plans are interrupted. So if we can retain and continue to graduate at the same or better rates as pre-pandemic, I think that would be a major success at this point for a lot of institutions who are really at risk. Beyond that, I think as I mentioned earlier, I do believe even research universities are going to be challenged to serve a much more diverse student population in every way, with much greater demands for personalized learning. And we will be challenged to adapt to our students' needs and their career expectations and their academic goals. So success in that arena to me looks like how could we measure our innovation and our flexibility in terms of continually seeking to improve our research and our academic graduation rates.
Well, APLU is focused, we have over 130 universities, and Carroll is one of them, working in our Powered by Publics initiative that focuses on narrowing the achievement gap between underrepresented students and the majority. And of course, underrepresented students will have many different definitions. We went into this project thinking of the classic definition of racial ethnic minority status, but I think Carol's group actually was the one that pushed us to look at other types of minorities. And there are the urban serving universities that look at their minorities, and of course the HBCUs are not racial ethnic. It is more socioeconomic, and so you have all those different definitions of underrepresentation, and we are really focused on narrowing the achievement gaps in their graduation rates. Of course, retention is a precursor for that, but we are focused on completion of the degree program. In this environment, it is more difficult, because we see the pandemic has created a significant amount of disruption in students' academic programs. We have found that, and there are surveys out there which demonstrate that the pandemic has resulted in a decreased enrollment for first-time students, especially, which is surprising, at the 2-year community college level. The first-time students went down even more than at the public 4-year level. Strangely enough, the private for-profits went up in first-time enrollments. And so, you know, it is not just a matter of academic preparation we're facing now. It's not a matter of even the traditional fact that underrepresented students many times do not perform well on standardized tests, but the economic disadvantages that the pandemic has created. We thought that students would be able to enroll, would enroll, maybe transferring from 4 years to 2 years because it's cheaper. That didn't happen. And so the students who are adversely affected by the pandemic just didn't go to school at all. And so we see that the racial, ethnic makeup of many of our universities are actually trending the other way because of the pandemic. It's not in the way that we want it to be. So this, and you know, anecdotal evidence says that many of our schools said that even with the promise of a full 4-year tuition payment, the minority students just could not afford to come, the living expenses. So how are we going to address those things that we're just not prepared for? Financial grants, not just aid, but financial grants are not even enough. What do we do? Those are difficult. And it really makes the DEI challenges even more difficult to address in this environment. And the, you know, personalized learning, I'm very pleased that Carol has mentioned that because strangely enough, Tim Scott, Representative Tim Scott, mentioned personalized learning and the increased use of technology as one of the outlooks, right, for the future Senate. So that's an interesting take, and so we certainly have a lot of support there. Yeah. But then again, that creates the digital divide. How do we mitigate the digital divide? And as we know, that's not just a rural problem. It's even an urban problem, right? Because there are dead spots within our urban landscape. So we have to work across boundaries to work with network folks, to work with internet providers, to work on a large scale. Universities can't do it by ourselves as we would like to think. So that's why we need a lot of advocacy, federal advocacy, that will enable us to achieve the mission that we are setting out for ourselves and for the country as a whole, and thereby hopefully will position universities as a group with improved public perception of our value to the community.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of really interesting points. I want to get to some of the questions, but I think one of the things I want to kind of reemphasize is on this completer retention process. As all of us know, getting some college and not completing in some sense is worse than not having started at all, right? And so we do have a really specific challenge about how do we want to make sure that the students who have started at our institutions get a chance to actually complete and finish their degree. We know that that is really, really important. So I've gotten a couple of questions. I'm going to throw the first one off to you, Anne. This is from a former colleague at the place where you were the dean at Boston University. So as you look forward to the post-pandemic research university and issues of access and equity broadly, how do you see the future of the faculty, considering that much of undergraduate teaching is taken up by non-professional faculty and or part-time faculty, right? So we're looking at a faculty mix that is different than what we would have seen a couple of decades ago. So how do you think about it?
Right. So let me give a shout out to my good colleague Beth Lazo for asking that question. So thank you. As Beth knows, I've long been a real champion of the professional teaching class, which often brings the most innovation to and experience to our teaching ranks, and often are the leaders in this. In new innovations in teaching, in pedagogy, because they focus on that. And this pandemic pivot was a great example of that, where I saw across the board what our non-tenure stream, which we call appointment stream faculty, were really tremendous leaders and helping their tenure and tenured colleagues to learn how to use the educational technology, which maybe they haven't been used to before. But I think that a very good point is that we are probably going to be using more and more part-time faculty as we move into more online teaching. And that is a place where there could be real tensions and difficulties. And so, to my mind, where we can resist that, where we can create a really motivated and excited group of non-tenured stream, but actually very engaged in the teaching enterprise faculty, we will have the best of all possible worlds at a research university. So what we have to do, though, is make sure that that's not a class system, but it's rather different expectations for their work, and really support those faculty and champion their efforts. So that's where I see my efforts going in that direction.
Carol, did you want to add anything?
Sure, I agree with everything Ann just said. I mean, just like the student needs are becoming individualized, in some ways the faculty role has moved quite far afield from that classical, 1975 generalist, back in the day, pipe smoking, white male with the leather patches on the blazer. I mean, they were generalists. They were scholars, they were teachers, mentors of students. I enjoyed a few classes with individuals like that myself. But today we seem to require so much more specialization of our faculty. If you're going to teach in this environment today, you really need to be an expert in the pedagogy of the type of instructional delivery you are choosing to use. Think about that. I mean, you had a piece of chalk as and a blackboard. That was the technology of your instructional delivery. And just like we are now, I've all had to master Zoom in 4 hours time. Our faculty are being asked to master pedagogy in about 4 hours time. So the need to specialize, to be able to be at the peak of your game in those niches seems so inevitable to me. And so how do we reconcile that and treat people fairly and not sustain a class system, if you will? As Ann mentioned, we need to respect our faculty who are the experts in instruction and figure out a way to recognize them for the value they contribute while preserving the opportunity for our researchers and those individuals who do the work with the grad students of developing the next generation of researchers and academicians. So that was a very long way of saying we're in for greater and greater specialization. So we better figure out how to do that equitably and fairly.
So I think we have time for one more question. Bernard, I'm going to address it to you first and then allow the others to kind of chime in. So this is from my colleague at, I believe, Emory University. And she agrees with our the challenges that are going to be facing with low-income students in our institutions. And so her question is, what public-facing work can you leaders do to advance the commitment and equity to higher education funding and other aspects? So do you have some thoughts about that, Bernard? What public-facing work do we need to do to get that equity commitment in the funding area?
So APLU has various positions that we are proposing to staffers on the Hill. With respect to that, of course, increasing another stimulus funding bill, specifically for higher education. Now, one of the things that was addressed some time ago that may be a part of this advocacy effort is federal-state partnerships, in which the federal government would provide funding to the states to be distributed to universities and other higher education institutions according to certain metrics that they would provide. And of course, this would be targeted. This was pegged to the amount of federal aid was pegged to the Pell grant. We're hoping in the new administration that the Pell grant will be doubled. That's what we're hearing. That may be something coming up. So I think that would be a definite benefit. But I think that, you know, what institutions can do to make a case for that is many institutions have demonstrated through the emergency grants initiatives that are taking place, how those make a big impact on low-income students. And I think providing evidence to that effect as to the dramatic difference those make in student completion rates with just a small amount of investment can say something to our legislatures at the state and federal levels. Of course, demonstrating the student stories. Stories are very influential to, to legislators. And so providing, you know, access to those stories and demonstrating how many of our institutions, and maybe at yours too, you have programs that provide financial resources to students who need it. And in many cases, because of the financial assurance, we have found that when I was at University of Florida, we found that those students graduated at a higher than the normal rate. And they were not necessarily exceptionally well prepared, but that's just the wraparound services we provide. And so demonstrating the success that financial certainty produces to our government agencies, I think is a strong case that we can make.
Yeah, Ann.
Yeah, I want to provide just a little bit of evidence for this. We, a year ago, instituted a program we call the Pitt Pell Match, Pitt Success Pell Match Program. So we effectively doubled the Pell Grant. And by doubling the Pell Grant through our institutional, you know, match, we closed the gap in 1 year for retention between Pell and non-Pell students. Went to zero, from about 5% to 0%. And we also just analyzed the student loan data. We drastically lowered the amount of indebtedness that students are increasing. So we expect, of course, in 4 years, we'll see a much higher graduation rate too. And in addition to that, this helped us to recruit a more diverse, racially diverse set of students naturally. So the doubling the Pell, just erasing that financial insecurity, or at least lowering it, has been tremendously successful.
I would love to continue to go on and on. I think we would have lots of things to talk about, but I do want to be respectful of your time and our schedule. So Carol and Bernard, thank you all again for joining us for a wonderful conversation.
Thanks very much for having me.
You
Bye-bye.
have
Thanks very much
our,
for having us. I just missed the personal interaction, though, I will say.
Yes, it is very different.
yeah, on behalf of the Reinvention Collaborative, we're indebted to you all. We so appreciate your perspective, your experience, your expertise. This has been marvelous. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Steve. Keep up the good work.